This is day 16, and today we're going to talk about VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP functions. So if you don't understand how lookups work, just know that you do it all the time without knowing it. So I'm going to give you an example. So let's say you're in a restaurant, right? And you're looking at the menu and you tell the waiter, can I have dish number 104? So you actually don't mention the name of the dish and you don't mention the price either. All you do is just give them the code. And in your head, you're saying that's a ham and cheese sandwich. And I can see that the cost for it is $8. That right there, my friend, is a lookup because what you did was you gave an input, which is 104, and you used a reference table, which is the menu, to look up the information related to that code. So, in other words, the dish and the price. So, in Excel, lookups behave the exact same way. So, if it's a VLOOKUP, it helps you search for a value inside a column, and then it's going to return the related value from another column in the same row. So, let's look at a VLOOKUP example just so that we understand this a bit more. So let's imagine you have a list of employees in a table, and each employee has a unique ID. You can see which departments they belong to, you can see their access groups, and you can also see their privilege levels. So if you want to find out what department employee number 4 belongs to, you can manually look it up, or you can create a VLOOKUP function to find that for you. So let's explore how this works. I'm just going to type department. And then what I'm now going to do is I'm going to type VLOOKUP. So this is the VLOOKUP function. And basically, the first argument is the lookup value. So that's the value that we're looking for in the data. So in our case, we're going to type employee 4. And then the second argument is just the range we want Excel to look for the value inside. So I'm going to select the entire table. And we're telling Excel to look for employee 4 inside this range. And then the third argument is going to be the column number of the value we want to return. So in our case, since we want the value in the department column, this will be column number 3. Because if you notice, the first column is employee ID, the second column is name, and the third column is department. So we're going to type in 3. And then we'll add false so that we're telling Excel to find the exact match. So just do this if you want peace of mind. And then we close that. And then we get marketing. So employee 4's department is the marketing department, as you can see right there. Now let's say we have another page, and this page has a table that tells us the systems that each employee is allowed access to based on the access group that they belong to, and the maximum login attempts that they're allowed, as well as whether they're allowed to work remotely or not. So what we can do is let's figure out what system the employee is allowed access to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in allowed systems, and then I'm just going to borrow the formatting from these two, then just paste it there. And now we're going to type VLOOKUP because what we want now is we want to find out what systems the employee is allowed access to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on employee, and then I'm going to enter the security sheet again. And then I'm just going to select all of these cells here. And then I'm going to type comma. Then I'm going to type in 2. And that simply means that we're checking within the second column in this sheet so that we understand which systems the active employee is allowed to access, depending on what access group they're in. And then I'm just going to type false and then close the bracket. So based on who I selected, if you're an employee, if your access group is employee, you're only allowed access to HRMS. So if I go into that, as you can see, employees are only allowed access to HRMS. So VLOOKUPs allow us to search for values vertically. So what that simply means is it allows you to search for values in the columns we tell it to from top to bottom. So, but what if our data is not vertical? So in other words, what if we don't have the headers on top and the records after it? What do we do then? In a situation like that, that's when we use the HLOOKUP function. So let's say you run a school and you have different test results for the students in your class. So you have your subjects and they're all stacked to the right instead of having them underneath it. And you have the score results of your students right next to them as well. So for David, you can see all his test results to the right of his name, and Billy, the same thing, and so on and so forth. So let's say you want to look at how Sally performed in science. Because the subjects are listed on the top row, this is actually great for HLOOKUPs. So this is what we're going to need, right? We're going to go into this cell and we're going to begin using HLOOKUPs. So type HLOOKUP and then we're going to type science because the first argument in the HLOOKUP function is the lookup value. So in our case, we want to find the subject science. And then the second argument is going to be the range we want Excel to look into. So in our case, we're just going to select the whole table. And Sally is located in the fourth row of this table. So I'm going to type in 4 because the third argument is actually telling Excel to return the value from the fourth row. Then we're going to type false, and this tells Excel to return an exact match. So we now know that Sally scored 90 in her test. So if I was to change this to, let's say, maths, we now know that Sally scored 95 for maths, as you can see right there. So what we can do, let's format this a little bit. So let's say Sally's grades. Then let's merge the center. And then what we can do is we can actually create a drop-down list so that we can select any subject we want, and this can dynamically change. So let's do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all the subjects from the top here, and then I'm going to enter a new sheet, and then I'll right click, and then I'm going to click transpose. And as you can see, it's no longer lining them up horizontally. It's now done it vertically. And then I'll go back to my sheet, and then I'm going to click on this cell here, and then I'll click on data, the data tab, and then data validation. And under the allow dropdown, I'm going to click on list. And the source is going to be that sheet that I've just created. I'll select all the values there. And then I'm going to click OK. So what I'm now going to do is I'm actually going to update the HLOOKUP function. So as you can see, I hard-coded the subject into the first argument. Now, instead of that, I'm going to point it directly to the cell that now has the drop-down menu. And this drop-down menu is going to allow us to select different subjects that Sally's taken. And I'm going to hit enter. At the moment, it's returning an error, and that's because this is blank. But if I select a subject, you can see that this changes. If I select a new subject again, it now dynamically changes. So as you can see, we have access to all of Sally's grades, and we can see how she's performed for each subject without having to hard code any values into our formula. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually take this to the next level, and we're actually going to practice on another data set. So this will be our main exercise for today. So let's say we work for IT operations, right? And our job is to manage all the company laptops, the employee permissions, and all the security policies. So we have two data sets. So the first one is going to be IT asset inventory. So this is where we track which laptops are assigned to what employees. And we have a second data set, and this lists all the security policies that apply to all the different types of laptops we have available. So what we're going to do is we're going to use VLOOKUPs and HLOOKUPs to extract the information that's relevant to us. So the first thing we need to do is we're going to use the VLOOKUP to find the asset ID of an employee based on their employee ID. I'm going to type employee ID, and then I'm going to type asset ID. And then I'm just going to format them. So I'm just going to add borders around them. So I'll just zoom out a little bit. I'm going to manually type an employee ID. So I'm going to type in employee, let's say 106. And then I'm going to move into the asset ID field. And then I'm going to type VLOOKUP. And then my lookup value is going to be this employee ID. And I'm going to search for this inside this table. And then I want the asset ID returned. So that's going to be the third column in this table. So I'm going to type 3. And I want the exact match. So I'm going to type false. Then hit enter. And there we have it. So the asset ID assigned to this employee is LAP 006. as you can see right there. The next thing I want is the laptop model. So we're going to need to use the VLOOKUP to find the laptop model, and that's going to be based on the asset ID that we've just found. So I'm going to type laptop model. Then I'm just going to copy the formatting using the format painter and just apply it to that. Now I'm going to type VLOOKUP. I want to find this asset ID, and I want you to look inside the asset ID column and the laptop model columns. And because I want the laptop model, I want you to return whatever you find in the second column. And then I want you to return the exact match. So we're going to type false, then hit enter. And it's found the MacBook Pro, and that is correct. And to test if this is really working, you can actually change the employee ID. So if I was to change it to, let's say 2, as you can see, it dynamically changes. So the results are being updated as long as I give it a valid employee ID. So if I do employee 101, you can see the laptop model's changed and the asset ID is also changed. If I give it something that doesn't exist, let's say 109, then it's going to return these errors because there is no employee 109. So let me just change it to another valid employee. So let's try 107. And there we have it. So we have the asset ID, we have the laptop model for this employee. But what we now need to do is to find the security policies that are linked to the employee. And that's going to be based on the laptop this employee has access to, or the laptop that the employee is linked to. So let's first find out the maximum login attempts that they're allowed. So I'll just type in maximum login attempts. Let's color this, let's say blue. Then we're just going to add borders around that. And now, because we're dealing with horizontal data, meaning that the headers are actually in the first column, we now need to use the HLOOKUP function. So I'm going to type HLOOKUP. And the lookup value that I'm after is the laptop model. So I want to find this laptop inside my table. And I want you to look inside this table. So I'm going to select the entire table. And it's going to be the second row you find the data that I want. And I want the exact match. So I'm going to type in false and then enter that. So the maximum logins that employee 107 is allowed to make is 4. And that's based on the laptop that this person has. So if I go to HP Spectre, you're going to see that anyone with a HP Spectre laptop is only allowed a maximum of 4 attempts, as you can see right there. But what if I also want to find out the VPN access of this employee? Yeah, let's try that. So let me just type in VPN access, and I'm actually going to copy the formatting using Format Painter, apply it to VPN access. So I'm going to type HLOOKUP, and I'm going to point back at the laptop again. So we need to find this laptop, and we need to find it inside this table. And VPN access can be found on the third row of this table. So we're going to type in 3, and we want the exact match. So we're going to type false, and then we hit enter. So is this person allowed VPN access with this laptop? The answer is no. We can confirm that by just looking into here, and that's correct. Also, what we don't want to do is we don't want to keep hard coding the employee ID. So let's create a drop-down that allows us to dynamically change all of this based on the employee ID. I'm going to go to the data tab, and then I'm going to data validation. And then under the allow option or the allow drop-down, I'm going to click on list, and the source is going to be all of these values. And then I click OK. So now I can simply dynamically change the employee ID. And as you can see, the data also changes. And if I want, I can align everything to the center. So let me just align everything to the center. And there we have it. If I just keep on switching, you can see that the results are automatically updated based on the dropdown. I no longer need to manually type anything into there. And it returns a data validation error, which is wonderful. It just prevents us from entering any typos into that. So what do I want you to take from today's lesson? Use VLOOKUPs when your data is sorted vertically. So that means your headers are in the first row and each row is stored below it. So if you need to search down a column for a value and it needs to be returned from the same row, that's when you should use VLOOKUPs. You need to use HLOOKUPs when your data is sorted horizontally. So that means all your headers are in the first column and your data runs across the rows. So if you need to search across a row and you need to return something from the same column, that's when you should use HLOOKUPs. But if you do want to practice this further, I'm going to leave a link to the GitHub where you can find the workbook that you can practice with. But until then, I hope you enjoy that. And that closes VLOOKUPs and HLOOKUPs.